because today I'm coming to you live from Napa Valley, California, wine country. I've got my Starbucks in hand, as is prescribed for the show. I got my Starbucks in hand and I'm ready to dive in with you about the most powerful, the most influential conversations of your life. Now think about it. You know, you're probably, if you're watching this show, there's no doubt that you're interested, maybe even committed to leadership and your development as a leader. I hope that that's true. And maybe you're not. Maybe don't consider yourself a leader yet. Maybe you're in pursuit of becoming a leader, not necessarily as a role, but a leader in your own life. And what I was thinking about this morning, because I've just spent the weekend here in Napa Valley working with about 20 CEOs, and 6 of them had their partners with them, meaning their significant others. And we were working on a lot of great stuff, especially looking at what we call the soul of leadership, the soul of your business, and what that means in the context of interaction is the soul of relationships. So this was a pretty powerful conversation. Went to places that I'm sure very, very few, if any, people in my audience expected it to go to. It's not the kind of usual stuff. And what I do is really not the usual fare for leadership. Because a lot of it is, certainly I'm guiding, I'm directing, I'm teaching, etc. But a lot of it is a conversation. And the reason I decided to do it like that was because for years I was a teacher. I taught people what it was that I knew about the given subject. But here's what I found, is that my life, meaning me as in Dov Baron, my life and many of the lives of the people that I've gotten to know over the years, their lives have been changed certainly through taking great workshops and great trainings and reading great books and having great coaching and all those kinds of things. But a lot of people's lives are changed in such a phenomenal and fundamental way by virtue of a conversation. I mean, think about that. What is the most powerful conversation? What is the most influential conversation you've ever had? Now, you could have been on either side of that conversation, by the way, meaning that you could have been the one that was delivered something that completely impacted somebody's life and shifted them. You could have been the person who had a conversation and somebody was speaking with you, and what was said to you shifted you dramatically and changed the way that you saw yourself, your world, whatever it was, your relationship. And it's these conversations that really change everything. So I became fascinated with that many years ago in trying to understand that. Because, as many of you know, I started out as in this world at least, as a counselor, as a therapist. And very often somebody would come in and they want to have a conversation, which I was supposed to be very passive in, as a coach, or as a counselor rather. They want to have a conversation about their significant other. They want to talk about, for instance, that, you know, my partner is, and then, you know, fill in the blank with the problems with that partner. And they would want my guidance on that. They wanted me to sort of help them with that. And of course, you know, sometimes we made great progress with that. It was wonderful, but there was always this element that I really had to deal with. And the element was this. In a conversation about another person, even if you're getting spectacular guidance, the problem is that the person guiding you has a one-sided view. So in a recent conversation, I'll give you an example. In a recent conversation I was having with a CEO of a company, you know, I mean, this person has, was it 250 outlets across the US in what it is that they do. There's a very highly successful individual talking about challenges in his primary relationship. And he's telling me all about his partner, and about how the problems are, and how she is, and how she won't do this, and how she's not interested in doing that, and blah, 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 all these things. And as I listen to him, you know, this is not sounding like it sounds like he's in a pretty abusive relationship. It's sounding like, you know, that his wife, mother of his children, is quite destructive beyond measure. And he's asking me for guidance. Well, if I'm having a conversation with somebody who appears to be in an abusive relationship, I certainly can't tell them what to do. That would be crazy. But if you ask my opinion, if you're in an abusive relationship, my best advice is get the hell out of there, of course. But there's a problem right there. So what's the problem? The problem is this, is I have to presuppose that the person's telling me the truth. Now, are they telling me the truth? Of course they're telling me the truth. They're telling me the truth from their perspective. Is it the truth? Of course it's not the truth. That's something else altogether. So I've got to now examine that. So the insight that I've got to give with the pre-frame of saying, based on the information you're giving me, I've got to understand that I'm receiving a biased, one-sided information that's not necessarily the truth. So in a conversation like that, I could be giving direction to somebody that is completely off because it's one-sided, because don't have the full information. So in the example that I gave you just now about the CEO that I was working with, having this conversation with, and he'd been part of a training that I'd done, you know, a couple of months ago, and we were having this conversation, you know, and I actually got to speak to somebody who had been his coach before, and the person who had been his coach was saying to me that, you know, they had met his wife, and the wife was not at all the way that this CEO had described her. She was very different, and in fact, the coach suggested to me that maybe she was the one in an abusive relationship rather than being the abuser. See, fascinating, right? Absolutely fascinating. A one-sided conversation, a one-sided perception of a situation is never enough. Sitting down in a multi-generational family, I sit down with the senior leader. You know, this is the person very often who actually started the company, and I start listening to that person about the next gen leader who's about to step in, and it's very easy for me to start to go, wow, this person sounds, you know, the next gen leader sounds incompetent. Sounds like they have no idea what the hell they're doing. It's a good job that G1, meaning the senior person who's in play right now, the senior person who has the power right now, it's a good job that they're not letting go, because this thing could go down the toilet so fast if this next generation leader took over. Then I sit down with the next gen leader and have a conversation with them, and what? Bam, completely different perspective. In that perspective, you know, the senior leader is holding on like it's their last breath. Not only does not trust, but is not willing to trust that there's other opportunities, or there's other ways of doing things, and they're so rigid. So do you get what I'm saying here? That even in any of these conversations, we want to jump in, we want to give advice, we want to direct, we want to, you know, and in fairness to you, you probably want to do that from a very good place. You want to do that because, you know, you're kind and you're caring and you're loving and you want to support people. But be very cautious about where you're coming from, the directions you're giving, because what you're talking about may be incredibly one-sided and have absolutely nothing to do with reality from when you take in both perspectives. It may be completely different than it looks like. That being said, cheers. That being said, it seems to me that some of the most profound breakthroughs come from conversations. So taking this into consideration, that as the person in the conversation, that you're hearing a one-sided view, let's shift it to the other side for a moment and ask you this. When you're in a conversation, are you delivering a one-sided? And the answer is yes. Don't bother answering that. I'll tell you, the answer is yes. Of course you're giving one-sided, because you're in your own subjective reality, and none of us are objective in our subjective reality. We don't really do that. We don't really know how to do that. Even if you've done a ton of work on yourself and you've got a great deal of self-insight, maybe you will have a level of subjectivity, but true objectivity rather, is not going to happen, because you've got massive subjectivity. So you don't really have the ability to sit on both sides truly. So it's really important that in your conversations that you communicate that this is merely your perspective. Now, so I was doing a training yesterday. We were working with a group of CEOs. As I said, I'm down here in Napa Valley, California. I'm working with these CEOs, about 20 of them. As I said, there's about 6 partners. And we ended up talking, because I was talking about the soul of leadership, the soul of your business, and that means the soul of relationships as well as the soul of the individual. Like, what is the soul of your relationship? What does it come down to? And one of the things I was asked is, well, when you're in these relationships, when you know, all relationships, whether it's business or professional, how do you sort out what's authentic? How do you sort out what's real? How do you know whether you're telling the truth or whether it's your perspective? And again, the answer was, well, you don't ever fully know, because you're going to always be processing through your own filters. But one of the ways to do this is a question that we used to give out in our relationship program when my wife and I were working with couples and teaching relationship programs. And we still teach relationship programs, just inside of a corporate environment or inside of a company. But one of the questions that we would ask to people would say this. So let's imagine that you're sitting in front of me, and I would ask you this question. I would say, when did your last relationship end? And you would say, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 months ago, whatever it was for you. And I'd say, okay, that's cool. And then I ask you this question. Why did it break up? To which, of course, you would naturally give me whatever your insight is into why we broke up. Well, we broke up because we were going to different places. Usually people will say something vague and generalized like that, and then of course I want to push them a little bit further and find out what's the truth. So yeah, I get you were going to different places, but what were the differences? And that person will then tell me, well, we were going, I wanted to move here, or I wanted to do that, and my partner didn't want to do that, and it just, you know, we became on different paths. Okay, whatever the reason is, and I want to dig in a bit, and I want to find out what they really believe, find out if they're, you know, not really wanting to go there, but try and get the truth out of it. And then once I've got them and I can see that there's, you know, there's a real emotional connection, they're being truthful to me within the context of what they know to be true, of course. Once I've got them to that place, then I ask them the next question. And the next question I ask them is this. If your ex was sitting in front of me right now, and I asked your ex the same question, why did you two break up? Would they have the same answer as you? And invariably the answer is no. Invariably, it isn't the same. And what that does is it gives the person this objectivity in their own subjective reality. It gives them a way to step outside of themselves and see what it might have been like. Because then the person will go, well, no, she, he, the other person thought I wasn't really committed. Ah. This is the key with having those kinds of conversations. You want to have the best conversations of your life, the most powerful conversations of your life with somebody, and you're looking for some kind of guidance and insight. Remember, shift yourself into both positions. This is something I learned from the rabbis that I used to study with when I was a kid, much younger. And we'd sit around and the rabbi would pull out this document that's probably a paragraph, no more than a couple of paragraphs, from a great book like the Zohar, and he'd pull that out, and we'd have this and he'd read this piece to us, and then he'd say, maybe there's 6 of us in the group, and he'd say, okay, what does this mean? And you didn't get to say it out loud. He said, what does this mean? And you'd get like 2 to 5 minutes to think about what that paragraph meant, or those paragraphs meant. And then each of us had to give our insight into what the paragraph meant. But here was the tricky part. We drew lots for who would go first and who would go last. Nobody wanted to go last. And the reason you didn't want to go last is because the rule was you could not repeat anything you'd heard before. You could reference it, but there was no ditto. So you couldn't say, well, like Bob said. No. You had to reframe, restyle, restate in a different manner what it meant to you. Now what that did was that taught us a way to think from another perspective, and then another perspective, then another perspective, then another perspective. And then once you got to those, so now we've got, say, 6 people with 6 different insights, all of them in their own way valid about this piece, then the rabbi would come back and he would say, okay, so what's the impact of that on your life? How does that impact you? What does that mean in your life? So we have to go to this deeper level of Socratic questioning of ourselves and going deep into what things meant. And that gave us a way to understand things that is really quite rare. And it was last night we went out, we had the training here down in Napa Valley with this wonderful group. I mean, phenomenal group. I felt very blessed to be with them and to serve them. And to train them, and then we actually spent the rest of the afternoon together. I hung out with them, so we went to a winery, and there was wine tasting at lunch, and then later on we had dinner in a fabulous restaurant. It was a wonderful time. And of course, in that time, there were some amazing conversations, which were, of course, catalyzed from the training that we'd done in the morning. But those conversations, it's fascinating for me to listen, because the conversations are going to go mostly, not always, but mostly in one of 2 directions. And what are the 2 directions? The directions are this. It's going to go in the direction of that person who's having a conversation with me to talk themselves into not changing, to validate their position and not move, or they're going to have a conversation with me about looking at a deeper meaning for themselves, at a deeper impact on themselves. And this is the thing for you to listen to when you're having a conversation with somebody. Are you protecting your position? Are you protecting where you are? Are you trying to stay where you are? Are you arguing for your limitations, as Richard Bach used to say? Or are you really opening up? Because you might tell yourself you're opening up, but you're actually defending the position you're in. One of the things that I like to do with my clients is, not all the time, but occasionally, and actually more and more as time goes by, but I like to go for walks with my clients. I like to, I have 2 offices, and certainly sit in my offices and talk to them. But I like to, if possible, like on a day like today where it's beautiful weather, go for a walk. Let's just go for a walk and talk and have this conversation. When there's something that flows from the place of conversation that is so valuable. And a friend of mine that I was having a conversation with yesterday said to me, you should be paid for conversations. And I went, that's true. There's something that happens in the level of a conversation that can be quite dramatic and shifting for somebody who is willing to be open. Of course, that's not always the case. The person's not always willing to be open. So what I'm suggesting to you today is this. I want you to take a look at what it is that you want out of any conversation, what it is that you're willing to be open to. But now I want to shift over a little bit into this thing around powerful conversations and ask you this. I want you to think about some of the best the most powerful conversations you've had. I mean, the best conversations of your life. Think about those conversations. Think about who they were with, and think about whether they were about one thing. And I would guess that 99% of your amazing, powerful conversations were not about one thing. Now, what I mean by that is they likely started out about one thing and became about something else altogether. That was the transformation. The transformation was in the way that the communication, the conversation started here, but ended up over there. And that was the turning point for you. That was the place where you got it, whatever it was that created this super powerful and meaningful conversation for you. Now think about that in the context of how we operate. We operate in a very niche-based world, particularly here in the West, where, where we're looking for our specialty. But you need to develop enough skills to be not just niche. Of course, you want to have your niche. You want to be able to show your expertise in a specific area so that you can show the value, of course. But you can't be limited to that. You've got to be able to have a deeper conversation with people. You've got to be able to jump in with people and dive into whatever it is that's going on for them at the deeper level. So for instance, if you don't know how to talk about, in a meaningful way, of course, if you don't know how to talk about in a meaningful way, relationships, or you've been terrible at relationships, if you're not willing to go there with a client that you're helping with interior decorating, the depth of that relationship is not going to happen. The quality of your business, the quality of your relationships is dependent upon your willingness to be vulnerable, your willingness to step into a greater experience, meaning to reveal more of yourself and so they can reveal more of their stuff. We've got to make people safe to have conversations, meaning we've got to not make them wrong. We've got to not shut things down. And that's very hard to do if you're not willing to be vulnerable. If you're not willing to step into your own vulnerability and have courage about what it is that needs to be talked about, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to lose that relationship, even if it's a business relationship. It's going to just go away. And the interesting thing about it is that your competitor might not do things even half as well as you do. But if that person knows how to connect to people, if that person knows how to have a conversation that is powerful with people, your client, your customer is going to go to them. When it comes down to it, the bottom line of it is this. We've heard all this thing about being in the digital economy, all those kinds of things. But you know what we're really in? We are in the relationship economy. You better become masterful at relationships. That's the business you need to understand. Get great at relationships. Conversation, and becoming a great conversationalist and knowing how to have conversations that are real and deep and transparent and vulnerable and connected. That can transform your life, it can transform your business. So that's it. That's my Sunday show for you today, here from Napa Valley, California. Again, my name is Dov Baron, fullmontyleadership.com. And if you want to find out more about me, just get yourself over there, go take a look at that. And anything else you want to find out about me, like I said, you can just Google me. I'm everywhere. Until next time, this is Dov Baron, fullmontyleadership.com, and I am out.